Everyone, welcome back to the Aquarian Shift. My name is Jason Diltz, also known as Take a Call Deep, and in this video I'm going to talk about inner authority versus outer authority, specifically how that relates to how we relate to the divine. And I'm going to talk about why that's a really important concept for us to be understanding right now in this moment. And I'll begin by saying Happy New Year. This is the first time I've been on in 2025, and 2025 is a really important year, and it relates to what I'm about to talk about in terms of inner versus outer authority. Yogi Bhajan talked a lot about the changing of the ages. He talked a lot about the transition from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, and he specifically mentioned the year 2025 as a really pivotal turning point. It was the year 2025 that he said all of the changes, all of the rapid advancements, all of the perceived chaos that leads up to this moment is going to start to come to a head, and things are going to start getting more and more intense, and we're going to really feel it in 2025 going into 2026. And then sometime shortly after that is when the Aquarian age consciousness, the new age, would start to set in. So I've done a lot of research because I'm somebody that gets really interested in timelines and in the concept of time and in the idea that evolution is a time-coded event. So my teacher Tej had been talking about 2025 for years. I've been studying with her for about 8 years now, and I remember her talking about this back in like 2017. So more recently, I have researched other perspectives on timelines, and I found this really interesting book called Yuga Shift, and I'm going to share more about this book as I read more. I'm about a third of the way through it, but the author essentially talks about how the Kali Yuga is coming to an end in 2025. That's this year. Same year Yogi Bhajan talked about the Aquarian age and all of the chaos leading up to the turning into the new age would come to a head. So what the Kali Yuga is, over time, consciousness, the idea is that consciousness goes through an ascending arc and then a descending arc. And different scholars, different teachers have different time interpretations of how long each of these arcs are. I'm not going to get into that in this video, although I will in a future video. But essentially, there's a long arc when the virtue, when the consciousness is rising and humankind is becoming more virtuous, humankind is becoming less sickly, humankind is becoming more kind, and we're becoming more and more in that godlike frequency, and that slowly rises over time. Generally speaking, it's thought that this is about a 12,000 or so year ascension. Then we reach a pinnacle, and gradually, slowly, for the next 12,000 or so years, we descend, and we become more unkind. Virtue becomes less and less over time. We become further and further disconnected from the source, from that God consciousness. And the idea is that at the lowest point in that is the Kali Yuga. And this is when there is very little virtue, when there is very little kindness, and where we see ourselves and perceive ourselves as being very separate from God's source, from God consciousness. And essentially, we've been living in the Kali Yuga for the last many thousands of years. There are several perspectives that say that we are coming out of the Kali Yuga, and that we're coming out of it very soon. This particular author of the Yuga Shift says that the year that we're coming out of the Kali Yuga is 2025. That does resonate with me on some level, specifically because of what I've learned in my yogic teachings. But whatever you think about timelines and such, I think everybody can realize that things are changing, and with it, we have to change. And that's why I wanted to talk about inner authority versus outer authority. I've shared on this channel many times that I grew up Christian. I was going to church every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Wednesday night, and sort of ingrained in that idea of Christian religion is the idea that God is outside of you, and you go to church to connect with a God, with a source that you don't inherently have living in you. There was music, there were songs every week when we would go, and I didn't like most of them, but the one song that I did like, that I recently heard, and that's what got me wanting to talk about this, is the song called Awesome God. And the lyrics are, "Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above. With wisdom, power, and love, our God is an awesome God." And, you know, it sounded really cool as a teenager to sing that to these like thundering lyrics, and Michael W. Smith, I think, was the one that made the song really popular. And for whatever reason, I just liked that song. And I now realize why. And it's because coded in that song was one of the foundational lessons that I had to learn in this life. And that is that while, yes, God force is awesome, it does not in fact reign from heaven above. It's inside of us. And I've spent, the last many decades of my life coming to a slow realization of that shift, that it's all about the authority that is in us, not the authority that is outside of us. And to me, that's the biggest challenge of this shift from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius, is this shift in authority. It's this collective shift, this collective understanding that while God is awesome, it is not a reign from heaven above. It is an emanation from within. And that's a really big concept for us to grasp collectively, because for the last 2,000 or so years, we have been in this Kali Yuga phase, this age of Pisces, where very much we had drilled into us this idea that God is outside of us and we must submit to the authority of God, which conveniently was interpreted through men to do, and I literally mean men, male men for the most part, to do their bidding, and so that we would serve their agenda. And what that did is that separated us from the actual God consciousness, from the actual understanding of ourself in the cosmos. And it basically made us servants, slave-like, to this mentality that we have to bow down to an authority that is outside of us. And it divorced us from the truth that the authority is inside of us. So now here we are. The age of Aquarius, it's dawned, its consciousness is slowly seeping into the collective psyche. We have this Yuga shift that is happening. These are convergent timelines. The precession of the equinox and the yugas, there is a through line for how these things converge. And whatever the exact date is pretty irrelevant. What matters is your own consciousness and what you're doing at this moment in time to grow yourself, advance yourself, and attune yourself to the energies, to the frequencies that are going on the planet. Evolution is a time-coded concept. That's true for the collective. There's a certain point in history when we'll gain certain knowledge, when we'll evolve in certain ways, when societies will move in certain directions. And that's true for the individual. When you're born, when you take an incarnation, you have a plan. You have a destiny. You decided that you would do certain things. And in that life that you're living, you time-coded when you were going to grow, when you were going to evolve in certain ways. And that's ultimately what we're here to do. That's the authority that we are here to really dance with. It's so important that all of us at this time take stock of our life, take stock of who we are, take stock of what we're here to do, because it's this time that we're alive on the planet that we have to shift, that we have to grow, that we have to evolve. And authority has to come from within. It can't come from outside anymore, because the times have changed and the time codes have changed. And you're only going to progress, you're only going to advance if you have inner authority, if you have a sense of direction for your own life, because you can't wait for somebody else to give you the answers anymore. There is no set foundation for what is right and what is wrong for everyone on this planet in terms of how you're supposed to evolve. That age is over. That was the last 2,000 years. This is the age of Aquarius. This is the age of self-authority. This is the age where you yourself will decide what matters to you. And it's really important that we all understand this as a concept and that we find ways in our own life to implement this. And I think we're all struggling with that right now. You can see this playing out in the collective, and you can look at your own life and see how this is playing out there. I know I really struggle with this. I'm so used to the power being outside of me in so many ways, it's difficult for me to grasp that actually I can be the generator. And one of those ways that that's been coming up for me in the last year or so is in terms of what I do for a living and how I make money. I come from, like many of you do, the Piscean model of you go work somewhere or for someone and you get a paycheck. That was my life for a very long time. Several years ago, I became self-employed. I had a business, and for the first time, I started being the generator of my own income, of my own money. And that has changed and evolved. I don't have the same business that I had anymore. So I'm wrestling with this paradigm of like, oh, do I go back and do the thing where I go work for somebody else and get a paycheck? Or do I decide that no, the authority is within me, and I made some money doing something for a while on my own authority, and I'll figure out how to make some money and do something for another little while within my own authority. And that's what I've decided to do. And I don't know what that's going to look like yet. But what I do know is that the most important lesson for me to learn in all of this was that the authority was within me. And to me, one of the biggest changes we're going to have economically is this idea of self-employment, this idea of self-sovereignty when it comes to earning money. I think that's going to be a really, really big theme of the Aquarian age, especially as the planet Uranus moves into Gemini, which is going to be happening later this year. I believe it's early summer that Uranus first enters Gemini. That's really going to usher in a new age where you're going to see more people figuring out how to make money being them and being self-employed and being the generators of their own, not just income, but success, rather than climbing a ladder in some, corporate structure or some like organization or devoting themselves to a quote unquote career that's really just making somebody else's cause advance. We're entering the era of self-authority. And when you are self-autonomous, when it isn't raining from heaven above, but it is emanating from inside of you, you are going to be the generator of your own success. And that's just something that we need to all think about. How can we become more the generators of our own success? And as I've said many times on this channel, God is a concept that means different things to different people. I look at it as generating, organizing, delivering. It's Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. It's that force, God, God. What are you going to generate? How are you going to organize it? And what is that going to deliver? Or in some cases, destroy, because it's the same force. The delivering and the destruction are the same force. So, as we shift into 2025, this critical year on the planet, let's all just ask ourselves, what can we do to bring more authority into our own life? What can we do to be more self-generating? And what can we do to add more good to the planet? Because ultimately that's what this is about. We've gone through a period where many of us socialized and organized our lives around churches or around religions. And again, we've had thousands of years of some version of that. That was kind of the life that I grew up in, the earlier part of my life. And then many of us have found religion to not be resonating in the same way that it has in the past. And if that's where you're at, if that's where you've been at, that's just part of your time-coded journey. And there's no judgment about where somebody else's time-coded journey is. If somebody else is very religious and going to church is kind of the staple of their life, that's That's where they're supposed to be. But if you've gone into a different phase of your own evolution, you may be finding yourself a little like, okay, so that's over, but now what? Because we haven't made a natural substitute, or we haven't formed something that naturally fills that void of needing connection, of needing community, of needing your soul fed. And that's one of the key challenges that we're facing right now as a collective. What do we do to meet that void? And to me, I think it's really important that conscious people who are meditators, people who are yogis, people who have some sort of spiritual practice and some sort of lineage tied to that, come together and have communities, because that's the age of Aquarius. It's all of us in our own ways contributing to the broader collective. So whereas yesterday we went to church, today maybe we're going to yoga class. I mean, I do that. That's my church. When I go to yoga class in the morning, that is how I'm connecting to the divine. And I believe that as the age of Aquarius unfolds, and as these next 2,000 years unfold, you're going to see more and more businesses that are the purpose of the business being bringing people together. And how can you bring people together? And how can you create community? And how can you have commerce around that? And how can you not focus on profit for yourself, but focus on bringing the whole collective together and augmenting and enhancing the individual? Once we figure that out, we're all going to be prosperous. And I think that that's really what the challenge of the age of Aquarius is. So yeah, let's get excited about 2025. Let's get excited about the Kali Yuga ending. Let's get excited about all of the changes. This has been talked about, this has been prophesized, and we're here now to experience the shift. That's why I call this the Aquarian Shift. It's about shifting out of an old mindset, and it's about shifting into a new mindset. So, for me, that was, our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above, to actually God and me and God, we are one. That's been the shift in my life, understanding that God is within me. God is not a source outside of me. So what's your shift? What are you shifting in your life? And in what ways are you needing to show up to be part of your community in a way that brings people together? Those are my thoughts for today. I will be back later this week. I do want to teach a meditation later this week around the concept of God and me and God are one. And I also want to talk more about this Yuga Shift book, because it's really, really exciting. So I'll be diving more into that very, very soon. Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate everybody who tunes in live, everybody who tunes in later, everybody who gives me feedback and comments. Thank you very much. May the longtime sun shine upon you, all love surround you, and the pure light within you guide your way on. Satnam.